Oh, thank you, Professor Indy. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Professor Indy and I have been working together for the last 4 years or so, since I became the Secretary General of the Pan-African Writers Association. The association, PAWA, is the headquarters is in Accra, Ghana, and is the umbrella body for all the African Writers Associations. As of today, we have an active membership of 45 countries, and it's been a big pleasure that we're able to collaborate with Professor Indy, who's helping us to handle the diasporic arm of the association. Well, we quickly go ahead. I want to welcome the panelists, and I think the first thing we need to do is to allow them to introduce themselves. So we'll do self-introduction. You tell us about yourself, and about 3 minutes with some emphasis on your writing career and any other thing you have been doing. So I think we can start with Jennifer. You are next to me. You can unmute yourself. You are still muted. You need to unmute.
There we go.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Fine.
That's good. My name is Jennifer Dukes. My pen name is J. Eileen. I would consider myself to be an emerging writer. I have one book that's published, a collection of poetry, which is entitled Wholesome Whole Poetry. Mainly, my poetry focuses on giving voice to all the internal noise in response to the external situation that goes on around us. I've written a couple of things lately, but they're more political in nature. So, with everything that's going on, it's you just have to be careful, what you say, how you say it, when you say it, who you say it to. It's a very interesting time. And to be quite honest, it's scary. So it's learning how to live in that kind of, I would say, contentious situation and still move forward and still write at the same time.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh,
can we move? Thank you. We'll come back to you. Let's go to Kamel for your short introduction. Can you unmute? Okay, yes.
I'm here. Hello, everyone. So
Yes.
my name is Camille Alexander, and I am a professor at Tuskegee University. My writing has, for the past several years, mostly been just scholarly, academic sort of stuff, but lately I've kind of not wanted to do that anymore. I've been turning towards the novel and the short story format. And part of it is because as a woman, I feel that when we do academic writing, we're basically working for free. Even when we publish academic books, we get pennies on the dollar for all of those months or even years sometimes of writing and not only editing our work. In the case of my work, which it was mine plus the edited articles of other people, you really don't get your acknowledgement. As the kids say, you don't get your flowers. And I'm also feeling that whatever is going on in the world today has not really changed for Black women writers. I think it has always been this way for us. The only thing that's changed is the day on the calendar. So I'm I'm interested to hear what some of the other panelists have to say, given that it's Women's History Month and you know, all of the stuff that's going on and how this informs our writing.
Thank you. Wonderful. Can we hear from Mary?
Hi, everybody. Good day. There are different
Yes.
times on the clock. So my name is Maimo Mary Ma. I come from Cameroon. I live in Canada. I'm a journalist, a life coach, and a public speaker, and a writer, of course. For a journalist, writing is like everyday work. But for writing for myself, I started writing with like when I was in secondary school, when I kept a diary, like recording things, mostly things about all the bad things that my friends did to me. I'll go and write them down and stuff. But also when I got to a high school, I improved from keeping a diary to like keeping a diary in boarding school was like the order of the day. But in high school, I was like becoming more mature, so I started writing poetry, like just writing the poems. But as an adult now, I went into writing about personal development and self-improvement. And I write in prose, but and poetry, but I have a YouTube channel. I decided to go audiovisual because I wanted to enlarge my audience. Yes, I wanted to enlarge my audience. So I do most of the empowerment, the personal development and self-improvement. I have videos on YouTube where I publish and where I interact. I do live streams and stuff.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. We go on to Rena.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raina Linares Jones. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. Southern born and raised in Alabama, in a small town not too far from where I'm currently living now. And I grew up, with a lot of space on a lot of land that my grandfather bought in the 40s. And as a Black man, that was unheard of at the time. But I really want to set the stage that I'm from a wide, big space. And so my foundation is being big and wide and taking up space. And let me tell you, the world didn't know that. So I faced many obstacles going out into the world that tried to take away all that space and bigness. But that's really where my writer's mind started, because knowing that I came from that foundation of progressive thinkers and change makers, I wanted to make an impact. So I went to journalism school, broadcast journalism, also did writing as well. Actually, my writing professor wanted me to switch from broadcast to writing, but I was like, no, I want to be on TV. It's so much more exciting. And so then after journalism school, I wanted an area to focus. I was so passionate about health. So I went into public health and embarked on a career as a public health communicator for more than 15 years. And we can talk more about that as the conversation progresses.
Thank you. So we have a very diverse. We have a panelists with diverse backgrounds. I'm sure it will make very interesting discussion today. Well, I think I will start with Camille, who is now into novel and short story writing. We want to know whether you have a favorite author or any author that has influenced your work. If you have any.
Okay, so I always tell people don't ever ask me who my favorite author is. That is an impossible statement to make. I mean, I know my background is blurred, but behind me is just one collection of books, and I've got them organized, library style. So this is all critical analysis here. And I've got Caribbean literature and African American literature in front of me so I can see them every time I look in a certain direction. Um, but I think the book that got me started on the path of studying Caribbean literature was Crick Crack Monkey by Merle Hodge. And so I'm Trinidadian, but I've lived in America a good chunk of my life and in the Middle East for another good chunk. And I remember going into Half Price Books in Texas and I saw the name Merle Hodge and I thought, I know her. And sure enough, I did know her. She was a few years older than my aunt, but they'd gone to convent school together. So I picked up the book, and the next thing you know, just started going down this rabbit hole of Caribbean women writers specifically. And what was very fascinating to me was the unity of the narrative structure. Definitely the tones were very similar, no matter what island or nation they were from. It's all very similar, but also experiences are often more alike than different. My PhD dissertation was on Caribbean women migrant writers in the UK. So of course I went to school in the UK to get my PhD, and I have to say they weren't lying. It is pretty much what they wrote. And then I started expanding into African women writers, and I did notice a consistency. We're all kind of speaking the same language and addressing the same issues, although our execution may differ slightly. There's definitely a unity there. And I'm still wondering, and this is off topic, but I'm just going to throw it out there because I'm feeling like it. I'm wondering why more HBCUs don't have Black Atlantic Studies programs. And I'm wondering why, if I do go to a university that has a Black Atlantic Studies program or a Black Diasporic Studies program, most of the teachers are not from the African diaspora. So just throwing that out there to the group.
Yeah, sure. We'll come back to that. Very
Yes,
interesting.
just throwing it out.
Yeah, sure. It's a very important topic that we can work on. So, Mary, you say you've done some prose, poetry, YouTube channel. Who are your favorite authors or those who inspire you to do all this? You have anybody, or you are the first person to do all this?
No, I can never be the first. There are so many phenomenal mentors before me. Like Camille was just saying, it's difficult to pinpoint a specific favorite writer when you are a literature student. Because I have a first degree in literature and languages, so I read so many of them. But the people that really like influence my way of work when I started working were like Flora Nwapa. I really liked her novels because of her perspective on the way culture regarded women and her fight for women's rights. So from the early on, when I started reading and understanding some of those cultural things, I like looked up to her novels. I read Efuru like so many times, and also Mariama Ba. So like they were always talking about inequalities, and I was like, well, what I see that there's a lot that women are doing. So why are they the inequality? So I started questioning, and when I started working, even though I was working in like a journalist, mostly in development communications, but I had a real a bias on women's emancipation and women's empowerment.
That's great. Thank you. It's nice to know you have some your mentors ahead of you. We quickly ask this will be a different question because Jennifer mentioned living in challenging times. You have to be politically correct in everything you do. So I want to ask, are there some experiences that you find very painful and that you have written about them, or you turn them into something in your writing? Do you have any experience like that? Personal things, political things?
Okay. Oh, wow. And just think I was jotting down notes of who my favorite authors were
Okay.
and
Well, if
formulating
you want
my
to take, if you
response.
want to start with that first, we don't mind.
Okay. Well, to give a brief background, my background is in chaplaincy. So I have a master's of divinity and I have a BS in biblical education. So um and then growing up, my parents always made us uh do Black history. My parents were a part of the civil rights movement. They did the sit-ins and all that good stuff. So my so one of my favorite writers, I think it changes as I change or as I become more curious about life and what's going on around me. One of my favorite authors, of course, is Maya Angelou. Uh, then when I look on the religious side, it's Dr. Jacqueline Grant, James Cone. Then when I look to contemporary, it is her name is Oni Nwaba Nili. She's a Nigerian British author, and I'm reading her book Someday Maybe. But it's but what hurts me the most that I've given voice to in a lot of my writings is that we are still experiencing everything that that a lot of our Black people have experienced from back then. We're still being lynched. We're still experiencing Jim Crow. We're still being oppressed. And a lot of people still don't want us to say anything. But it's becoming more oppressive when they say you can't give your own opinion and you have to just take it because that's what I say. I even wrote a poem about hmm, about it's nothing like one of the panelists said, nothing has changed. And we're still here. I mean, we're still writing about the same.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
how do we move forward? I mean, I don't understand why other people don't get that we hurt. We hurt like everybody else. We bleed like everybody else. We are human beings like everybody else. But the thing is, everybody came from us. So do you really do you hate me because I'm powerful, or do you hate me because you're afraid of me? That's the question I always raise. So I think it's a little bit of both. You know, we are a very resilient people, but we're tired. And I write about a lot about the weariness in my poetry too. We're tired. We just want to be. We want to have a full life like other people do. Especially as a Black woman, I would love to have a full life and not to have to worry about every little itty bitty thing, and safety being the main thing of those things. Security. So that's mainly what I write about.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
All right, Dr.
Yes.
Kediran.
Yes, please. Yes.
Sorry for interjecting.
Yes.
Dr. Danglat is on the call. So she joined the call. Maybe you would address her a few questions.
Okay. So is she on? I can't see her.
Dr. Danglat?
Yes. Do you listen to me?
Yes. Can you turn on your camera, please?
Thank you very much. Okay. Just a minute, please.
Yeah.
I want to tell you that it's a real pleasure for me to be with you. Thank you very much, Professor Belindi, for this invitation to participate to this very relevant meeting. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to meet you today. Let me introduce myself. I'm Mylène Danglade, lecturer at the University of French Guiana in regional language and cultures in the Department of Literature and Human Science. I live in French Guiana and I'm native of Martinique. At the same time, I'm passionate about poetic and novelistic writing, thoughts and essays on the human condition, the quest of identity, the journey of the being through the maze of existence. Humans are looking for themselves, encounter obstacle on their way, and they are looking for their way to, in spite of their history, their past, lost time, winding paths, strength with pitfalls. I wrote a collection of poetry in 2010, and also some novelistic about once again humanity, the humans who are looking for their way, each day. This is just some words to present myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's nice to hear from you. So we quickly go on to listen to Lena to tell us some of the painful experiences that you have gone through, that you have been able to use in your literature. Yes.
So first, I want to say my favorite author is James Baldwin.
All right.
And really,
Baldwin.
that's important for me to share that with you because James Baldwin writes about the personal and ties it to larger societal issues, right? So I really look to him for inspiration when I'm dealing with tough subjects. So in the space of health communications, public health, we know that there are a lot of inequities when it comes to health. And when you really look behind the data, it's really devastating. For example, Black women in this country are more than twice as likely. I think it might be more than 3 times now, because this is a story that I worked on over 10 years ago when I was interviewing a researcher, and she actually brought me into the data. You know, I wasn't just looking at the data as like someone on the outside. She said, you, Raina, this is you. You are more than twice as likely to have your child die before year 1 than your white counterpart with the same education, the same income, basically the same, environment. And I really was horrified because, a lot of times, like as a writer, especially a journalist, you do think that you're separate, and you have to have that separate sense from the people that you're interviewing, right? Because it's not about you, it's about them. But when this researcher brought me into the data, it was really devastating. And so my entire career in public health was focused on health disparities and health inequities. And, some of the other panelists were talking about, it's the same story. And yeah, in a lot of ways, it is the same story that we're dealing with. And as a storyteller, I'm always looking for different ways to tell a story. And as a journalist as well, like people are not paying attention to these health disparities facts. How can we get them to pay attention to them? And I believe it's through storytelling. It's through reframing the story from a lens of doom and despair to one of resiliency, one that shines a light on the human lived experience and all its complexities. And that's where I draw from James Baldwin, because he does an excellent job doing that.
That's great. Yeah. And we will go on again to talk about contemporary issues such as fake news and all these things that happen around us. You have so many social media platforms that on the tip of your finger, news spread all over the place, and some of them can be alternate facts. Sometimes they are apparent reality and all this sorts. So I want to ask Jennifer, how do you handle this as a writer? How do you situate yourself with all the unconfirmed news that go around and sometimes can cause some discomfort to people? What's your take on this? Yeah, you are muted. Need to unmute.
Okay.
All right.
Yes. The first thing I do when it comes to fake news, or the one thing I try to do, is I try to disconnect from social media as much as possible. I mean, I love TikTok and I love Facebook and Instagram and all those great reels. But when it becomes too much, I disconnect. But I also try to find stories that have been fact checked too. When it comes to politics, I try to listen to Jasmine Crockett as much as possible because she seems to simplify everything to make it more palatable, more understandable, more this is what you can do. So she makes me sit up in a sense. I mean, the world hasn't changed much, so you you look at it for what it is. And you try to protect. I try to protect myself as much as I can, emotionally, and by plugging into my spirituality. That's
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
You're
How
welcome.
about Mary? Mary, what's your take? You're a journalist, and among other things.
As a journalist, a communicator, you have to look at the trends, and then you have to look at the best practices. So as the emerging technologies, they are here. The virtual reality is here. There's no way we can really separate ourselves from what is happening today. And the future is more going to be like most things are done online. The future, more and more things will be done online. So I was like one of the people who like resisted the AI and all of that. But you will be surprised to hear that I went back to school in the University of Niagara Falls, where I'm doing a master's program in digital media, because I really wanted to see in person what all of this is about, and to really like, okay, there's no way you can live out of this. And if I'm going to live in it, let me really know where I'm putting my leg. Let me really know how it works. So emerging technologies are here. It is with us. It is the future. But we have our responsibility to be like, what footprints are we leaving? And so when we talk about all the emerging technologies, we also remember that there is that digital gap. So no matter how many people are going to be online, there are still half of the world's population, like the UNESCO statistics say, that are not connected, which means the future of books is still very important. So we are going to still continue writing books. We are going to physical books, we are going to do technology, but we are going to look at the best way, what value do we get from there? And we are going to continue raising awareness on the importance of knowing that most of those virtual things are not real, because they are edited versions of people's lives. Because I was living in Spain like a few years back, and there was a whole outbreak of a lot of young women committing suicide because of what they were seeing online and thinking that their lives were not really good, and it really affected them. So this society has to, like, us like writers and everyone else, we have the responsibility to raise that awareness. Those things online are edited versions, they are not real life. So people should know the difference, and we should really like take our own responsibility to consume what is useful for us and take care of our own mental health and well-being.
Thank you. That's a powerful one. So, Camille, what do you do with fake news as a writer? Do you use them to convert them to your short stories or novel, or you throw them away?
So, as Mary pointed out, we have to protect our mental health. And one of the methods that I use to do that is, if I know a website is more likely to take one side or another and not provide a balanced view of an event, I am not going to access that website. I stick to the websites that I know will just tell you what happened, and that's it. And I also don't watch the news. Watching the news, I've noticed, because I've been so in the past, Fox News wasn't that bad, right? 20 some years ago, Fox News wasn't bad. And then all of a sudden, it was very insidious. It started to get very one-sided, very aggressive towards certain groups of people and certain places. And if you weren't paying attention, it was like a slow cancer, just slowly eating away at your mind and your heart. So I've stopped watching the news. Now I read news reports, and I'm very cautious about what places I get those news reports from. So the only reason I'm on New York Post is because I want to read the gossip on page 6. I know the New York Post has nothing to offer me in the way of substantial news. I know if I go to BBC or CNN, I am more likely to get accurate information. I definitely stay away from talking heads on TV or talking heads writing, because now they've realized that some of us like to read and they've started writing. So once you make a mental list of their names, you just kind of avoid those things. And I know maybe people feel like, oh, you're living in a bubble. I'm not living in a bubble. I have to survive, right? And there is no way to keep your mental health intact with everything coming at you. And as a Black woman, when is it ever going to stop? The fifth of never. It's never going to stop. So you have to create some kind of safe space for yourself when you're accessing this information. And as far as incorporating it into my writing, I really don't have to, because truth is stranger than fiction. When I sit and observe different people, places, events, and I incorporate that into whether it's a short story or one of the chapters in one of the novels I'm working on, it's really funny. And when I read it back, I think to myself, where did this come from? And then I have to remind myself, oh no, you really saw this. This happened. Then I get a good laugh about it and I just move on. But I guess I would say, as far as news in general, whether it's fake news or accurate news, we do need to monitor where we get it from and how much of it we access.
Very good. Thank you so much. Just for the benefit of the online audience, we give you permission, I mean, the opportunity to ask questions or to also give us some insights into some of these things we are discussing. So just keep your notes We'll give you some audience later. Lorena, now you are a health specialist, and we know that in public health, news is a very important issue, whether fake or true or real. How does it affect your work, and how do you handle all these things that are going on around us?
So in the health communication, public health space, the media, we really do rely on the media to push out our important health information. However, from my perspective, because I am a storyteller, the way traditionally that health information gets out is not in a form that's going to resonate with the audience, right? It's going to have, in my opinion, these consequences that, you know, we didn't anticipate, right? So instead of, during a pandemic, instead of quelling fears, we're igniting it by the way that we're putting out information. So while public health communication relies on media, I think that in a space like that, we have to truly, truly understand the communication needs of our end users. And for me, because I know the science of storytelling, I know when I'm telling a story, people are locked in because that's just how the brain works. You know, the brain is designed to receive stories. And you're telling a story, the person is living that experience. And so that's why for me, early on in my career, after I went from journalism into the public health space, I kept that storyteller mindset. How can we take this data and turn it into a story? And so I think with all this fake news and all this confusion going on, I think if we focus on truth, you know, the lived experience of people, and start telling those stories. Don't, you know, we need to stop repeating the headlines, and we need to focus in on the personal narratives and show how what's going on at the higher level is playing out individually, because it's your neighbor who is, you know, just lost their job due to, you know, all these, you know, changes. It's your neighbor that you're going to be concerned about, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be the grocery stores who you know, are experiencing food shortages in your community that you're going to, you know, be concerned about, because you know that your elderly neighbor, you know, it can't get, you know, her food, you know. So I think just focusing on our lived experiences, that's the real truth.
Yeah.
I think that will break through
Thank
all
you.
the noise.
Thank you so much. Can we move to French Guiana and ask Miley, do you also have fake news in French Guiana? You are very neat and nice in that place. Nobody spreads fake news. And if you do, how do you manage this in your writing and in your work? Miley, you need to unmute.
It's me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry,
it's
I
you.
have some difficult
Okay, did you hear? Okay, can I repeat my question?
airport of Charles de Gaulle at Paris now, because I had a congress at the University of Bordeaux. It's not easy to write because there is a lot of work at the university. But I try to write in the evening because it's more easy to have some time, or during the vacancy. Donc it's not easy to have time to write as I would like to do it. but it's a passion, and I try to write when I have some time in the light, during the transport. Yes. And I think it's the same thing for the different author here.
Well, now, thank you for that.
Thank
I
you.
want us to ask again the issue of fake news, news that are not true, that are circulated on social media. How do you handle this? Does it affect you in any way? Does it affect your writing? Okay, Professor Bill, you need to translate.
OK, la question est ceci. Est-ce que le fake news affecte la manière dont vous écrivez? Quand tu suis les fake news, est-ce que ça influence ton écrit?
La question s'adresse-t-elle à moi?
Oui,
Ah, ok, sorry.
ça s'adressait à toi.
Yes.
Parce que c'est assez sonore et je n'en ai pas toujours. Alors, donc les fake news, il y en a toujours eu, il y en a encore, donc, mais il faut autant que
Fake
possible.
news, we have always had them, and there is still fake news.
Okay.
Yes, mais il faut autant que possible, il y en a toujours eu, mais il faut autant que possible faire la part. En tout cas, moi, je m'efforce de faire la part des choses et d'essayer de ne pas me focaliser sur tout ce qui, l'affluence des divers événements, des divers récits ou des diverses nouvelles qui ne sont pas toujours correctes, qui peuvent être alarmantes, mais c'est surtout se focaliser sur l'humain et ce qu'il vit au quotidien dans ses tracasseries, dans ses dérives. Je te laisse traduire, s'il te plaît.
So what I do, fake news has always been there. And I know it is still here today, alive and well. But what we have to do as writers is to stay focused on the human, on what our day-to-day living is, rather than paying attention to the fake news. We have to split what is fake and what is real, and make sure that we stay on course and address concerns that talk to our humanity.
That's great. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Je vous en prie.
Yeah, thank you. Now we want to talk from the perspective, because we are celebrating the Black History Month.
Women's history.
Women history. Yes. Now, as Black women writers, somebody like Jennifer has mentioned the challenges that you go through, and Camille also mentioned the problem of having very few Black Atlantic Studies program and all those things. But beyond that, as a Black writer who is in diaspora, so to say, because all of you have African roots, you actually are Africans, but you are now somewhere else. So, do you consider yourself a Black writer in diaspora, or you feel that where you are at home? And how does this affect your writing? I think I will start with Jennifer.
That's a very good question. I told one of my friends years ago, I said, I feel like I'm a displaced Black American. You know, yes, I'm American, but I feel connected to people in Africa. And it's, we're the same, but how can I say this? One way I approach is, one, I like to eat good food. So if they have good rice, I can go anywhere in Africa as long as there's good rice, good stew. We have stew here, we have rice here. So food is always good, a good place to start, and clothes is always a good place to start. And from there, but I feel more connected to, I love Black people. I love who we are as a people. I love, yeah.
Good. And can we go to Camille? What's your take on being a Black writer?
Well, I've been Black all my life, and I've been a writer since I was 3. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. But I think, and to be frank, I've gotten older. I'm not young at all anymore. When I was a lot younger, and this is after growing up in Trinidad and being transferred to America, I felt very much like I had been taken away from home and I felt disconnected. I definitely felt detached from Trinidad, and it was very hard to write, extremely so. But I've traveled since then. I've lived in a lot of other countries, and it doesn't hit me as hard as it used to. And of course, I always tell people when I was young, all I was young and thin. Now I have the ability to cross boundaries and borderlands anytime I want. Certainly travel and being able to go home to Trinidad anytime I want makes things a lot less intense than they were when I was much younger. When I was younger, I felt trapped in America. And don't get me wrong, I have American citizenship, but it's still in some ways doesn't feel like home, you know? But now that I've settled in Tuskegee, so the only reason I live in Tuskegee is because Dr. Indy actually pushed for me to be hired by Tuskegee University. And I always tell him we're going to battle this out later on about what he's done. But what ended up happening was I just fell in love with this town. And I have certainly become a part of this community. In fact, I'm pretty sure some of my friends and neighbors are on this Zoom call right now. And I found home away from home here. And down south, they say your home house. So my house has become kind of the home house for the entire family that's in America. So there are certain elements to being here specifically in Tuskegee that have been inspiring and freeing. And I also want to mention there's this lovely poem by a former student named Kimiko White, and the poem is titled "The South is a Holy Sanctuary." And I keep a copy of it on my phone because in the poem she writes about how when you come down south to the deep south, like Alabama, Mississippi, some parts of Georgia, there's a kind of connection to the ancestors that perhaps you don't feel in other places. When I'm at home in Trinidad, I feel connected to my ancestors. You know what I'm saying? Those of you who are living away from home, it's like you go home and you feel you know where you are, you're rooted. The rhizomatic connections are right there. But then when you travel away from home, sometimes you find yourself in this space of negotiation, of making do, you know. But then when you find a place like Tuskegee has been for me, then you can make a home here and you feel comfortable and you don't feel that disconnect. So that when you go home, it's, I'm home, it's great. But when you go back to, your home house, it's like, oh, this is nice too. And for those of you who are interested, you might try reading George Lamming's Coming Home, where he writes about that disconnect that the writer feels, or even V.S. Naipaul's Middle Passage, where he's writing about going back to Trinidad after having been in England for years and not really being able to go home, because that's the thing people don't understand. When you leave the Caribbean, sometimes you can't just go home whenever you want when you're young, when you're hustling. It's not until you get older that you can really reconnect with home. So it puts a little different spin on that term, home versus away,
Oh, thank you so much. Well, Mary, you are a Cameroonian. And so definitely you are not home in America. So how does this affect your writing? Or you think it has made your writing better? Or like somebody said, do you think in your African language before you now write in English? Or is the other way around?
That's very interesting. I will tell you that I'm a world citizen. I'm in Canada now. I am a Cameroonian. I studied in Nigeria. I studied in many other countries, and I worked like in 27 different countries.
Wow.
So my writing is really like, I'm more focused now. Like, I'm a life coach using my personal experience to raise awareness. I'm a life coach. I divorced 2 times, and I don't have children. So most of the things that I write about, which is why I decided to do personal development and self-improvement. I write about raising awareness on the stigma and the stereotypes that women back in Cameroon and in Africa have when they are divorced. And then for me, I was divorced and then 2 times, and then I don't have children. And I come from a culture where a woman's value is measured whether you are married. And not only married, you have to have children. And not only children, they have to be male children. So I'm using that, my voice, to raise that awareness that all the women who are divorced, you are not a failure because you failed in marriage. I'm not a failure. I am an amazing auntie and all of that. So the writing like a Black person, and having lived in so many of these countries, and having worked especially in women's issues, I discovered that women have the same issues worldwide. It's just the laws that are more protective in some places, or the mindsets that make women in the north more open. But if not, when you are a divorced woman, you are stereotyped everywhere. The difference now is women here, they take divorce like, if it's not working, I'm going. But back home in Cameroon, it's a do or die. I have to stay married if I have to be valued. But something happened to me when I went to Spain, and I was working with my colleagues, and like a lot of them were married or not married, but above all, a lot of them decided not to have children, and they say, I want to live child free. And so that burden that I had and that stigma that I had, oh, that I didn't have children, it was like, oh, so it's normal if you decide not to have children. And that's how I started like getting more confident, like rebuilding back my self-confidence, because I was really like broken. I thought I was a failure because I was following what society was, where society had put me. But I met people who say, no, you are your own unique person and you are worthy. It doesn't, you are not supposed to be defined by your marital status or whether you have children or not. So I write for everybody. I just raise awareness. And curiously, most of the videos, like when I do my analytics, most of the people who watch my videos are people between 18 and 34. Meanwhile, I thought I was talking to people above 50 or like older people. So I think that is a general question, it's a general issue, and that people just have to focus on their own self-improvement and value yourself and believe in what you can achieve and believe in the fact that you bring value and not rely a lot on what society wants to tack on you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for this new dimension you brought into the discussion. And Lena, what can you add to that?
Yes, I definitely agree with what Mary was saying. I think that this is a really great question and actually had me asking, who am I? I want to say that I think that labels are really for other people to try to understand you, right? So I think labels are okay, but I personally don't lead with labels. I lead with my heart and my passion, you know, as a storyteller, as a curious person who's focused on the lived realities of people and elevating their stories in a way that highlights their, you know, complexities and their resiliency. And so that's how I would describe myself, as a seer and a feeler, you know. But I definitely understand people wanting to understand my writing, and I do talk a lot about marginalized groups, and that's fine if someone wants to identify me as a Black writer, because, you know, sometimes I am focusing on Black issues. I also like the diasporan term as well, because as a little girl, my dad would flip through pages of books. We had a large size library, and he would flip through the pages and of history books, of travel books, and he would say, the Black man was there. The Black man was there. So as a child, I knew Black people were global. And so for me, just knowing that I'm a part of this global community gave me a sense of access, that I belong in any space and I can tell any story, you know? So.
That's great. So we go to French Guyana again and listen to Mylene. Yes. I think Professor Bill, you need to help us.
Yes. Dr. Danglade, on voudrait savoir si en tant que noir de la diaspora, vous écrivez avec cette conscience d'être noir, ou bien vous vous considérez comme toute autre personne à part les autres, le monde noir.
Alors, lorsque donc je suis amenée à écrire, eh bien, je me considère avant tout comme eh bien, un humain. Voilà, quelle que soit donc effectivement la sphère géographique dans laquelle je gravite, c'est avant tout le positionnement de l'humain. Et après, bien évidemment, donc il y a des considérations plus particulières, plus spécifiques donc au peuple noir, à nos combats, à nos luttes. Donc à ce moment-là, effectivement, je vais dans des orientations bien plus particulières. Je te laisse traduire, excuse-moi.
Si. Oh, thank you very much for this interesting question. When I start writing, I actually write from the perspective or consideration of myself first as a human. And then, as I progress in the writing, I start breaking it down to particulars, which are specificities of myself, as my consciousness as a Black person, and the Black struggle, the fight that we have to put up for liberation. And that's the way I proceed in my writing.
Et c'est sûr qu'on ne peut pas, comment dire, se départir de nos combats, des combats au peuple noir. Et donc, ça m'amène bien évidemment à m'impliquer, à me positionner moi-même aussi, donc dans ces combats-là, dans ces luttes, donc de manière à aussi décoloniser les esprits, décoloniser bien nos manières également de concevoir le noir hein, dans son parcours quotidien. Et cela, ça passe aussi par la plume, décoloniser effectivement la pensée, mais également l'écriture également, par rapport à tout ce qu'on a pu engranger comme représentation, de manière à venir en aide effectivement à nos frères et sœurs de par le monde.
I would just like to add that we cannot separate Blackness from our writing, because it is our daily struggle. And this, the writing must take into consideration this daily struggle, because it is a way for us to decolonize not just our minds, as Ngugi wa Thiong'o would say, but to decolonize our thinking, our writing, and take possession of what we produce.
Et pour terminer, je dirais que c'est vrai que le peuple noir a des particularités, des combats particuliers, mais néanmoins, donc, l'humain sur toute la sphère de la surface de la Terre, eh bien, lui, voilà, c'est l'humain, il reste humain, individu, et pour cela, eh bien, c'est ce combat, c'est cet éveil des consciences que je veux, en tout cas, susciter. Merci beaucoup.
So I would like to say that the Black man, while he has a specific fight, we have a struggle that we lead every day, but humans are humans, and there are struggles at every level. And what I am so concerned about in my writing is the awakening of consciousness, or the conscientization. I want people to be really aware of what is happening in and around them. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Well, we have done about 1 hour already. So I want to, before we go to the audience, I just want to take a last question. Then after the audience, we'll now come back to you panelists to answer whatever issues the audience will have raised. And this question is for you to advise us, because as two organizations here today, the Pan-African Writers Association, which is the umbrella body for all African Writers Associations, as well as the WAFORD, that is the Writers of African Origin in the Diaspora. How do you think these organizations can encourage young women writers? Because we see a very vibrant school of young women writers, but many of them have challenges. I mean, some of them, they don't get published on time. They don't have access to publishers. Some don't make enough money from their writing. Maybe they will need some things to add to their writing. So how do you think associations like this can help? Because we need your feedback. Again, I will start with Camille. You're a professor, you do with young women. So what's your take? How do we help?
Wow, that is a big question. And I also want to point out something that we haven't mentioned that we need to mention.
Okay.
The onus is often on Black women in these spaces to mentor and to support. And we are struggling. We are struggling mentally. Dr. Danglais just mentioned that there's so much work at the university. So how can she have time to write? And then layer on top of that, so you want us, and at the university, we are contractually obligated to teach, do research, and perform service. And then you want to layer another set of responsibilities on that to mentor. And the truth of the matter is, many of us have not been mentored. This is a lot to ask. And I would also point out that largely it is Black women who are tasked with these responsibilities of mentoring the newer faculty, the students, all of this. And this is not something that I'm just seeing now today. This is something I saw 40-something years ago in Trinidad. I saw that this has never changed. And while we want to do all of these things, we are not God. We cannot do everything.
Yeah, everything.
And I am not saying that our male counterparts do not mentor. I'm saying that by nature of our sex, the expectation of mentorship falls on us first and heavier than on our brothers. So how do we move forward? I don't have an answer because at any given time, and Dr. Indy will testify to this, there are no less than 5 students in my office who I am mentoring, supporting, counseling, tutoring, all of these things. I cannot even grade papers in my office. I have to bring papers home. There would have been nights when Dr. Indy has left the building and he used to be the last person to leave. But because of all of my mentoring tasks during the day, he has left me in the building. So what else must we do?
Thank
You know,
you.
and I'm not saying that I mind or
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I am hurt or
yeah,
offended. I'm
yeah,
not saying that. I'm just
yeah.
saying we are already doing the work.
Okay.
What more can you ask of us?
Mhm.
And some of us, you know, the 80-20 rule, 20% of a given work population does 80% of the work. Well, Black women are, for the most part, the 20% carrying the 80. We are the ants carrying 1,000 times our body weight. I cannot tell you how many students I have encouraged to be published. Kimiko White, whose poem, The South is a Holy Sanctuary, she was afraid to come and ask me to edit her book because she saw what I was shouldering. And you know what I told her? Give me the book, I will read it. I took it home that night and I gave it back to her the next day because I wanted her to be published and I wanted every poem to be right. And I didn't want her to get rejected because rejection to a young Black writer can be a death knell for the rest of your career. Sometimes it breaks you and you don't want to keep going. So I've been a member of Caribbean Studies Association for decades now. I have received some mentorship, but not a lot. And I don't know what an organization like this can do. All I could say is maybe your website could have links that are helpful to young writers, whether it be to people who are willing to edit 1 or 2 books here or there, or publishing companies like People Tree in England that will always publish Black diaspora and Caribbean and African writers. Maybe it's forming relationships with other publishing companies. You remember, I don't know how many of y'all remember the Women's Press from 40 years ago. University of Houston Central Campus has absorbed the Women's Press in the past 20 years. But in the past, if you were Black and you were a woman and you were an academic, you didn't have a choice. You went to the Women's Press or you went to the other one that Gloria Anzaldúa started. Maybe having information like that so people can save themselves, because sometimes the rest of us, we're drowning. You know, you remember what they always, I mean, we, all of us who are transnational, we know this routine. You get on the plane and they give you instructions. They say, put the oxygen mask on yourself before you go to put the mask on somebody else. We are struggling for breath. We have to breathe first before we can reach out and help others to breathe. And I know when I say this, maybe some people will be offended. You could be, but it's not a lie. It's not an alternative fact. This is what happens. And this is why a lot of times for young writers, when you go to conferences and you approach Black women writers, They seem harried. They're not angry with you. They don't not want to talk to you. But when they have 20 other people every minute pulling at their coattails, when they get to you, it's like, you know, and it's not, I hate you. It's just,
it's not their
I'm
fault.
drowning. I'm drowning. Help me. And let us be honest. How many of us are there?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we quickly, oh, that's a wonderful contribution. And we'll come back to it because there are some things that the audience will help us with suggestions on how to relieve the burden on our teachers. But let's go to Dr. Danglets, Mylene, and hear our own opinion on how associations like this can help young women writers. Professor Indy, I think you can help us. Yeah.
Dr. Dangler, la question qui vous est posée, c'est une petite réflexion. Comment l'association panafricaine des écrivains ou encore l'organisation WAFORD puisse aider des jeunes écrivains. Que conseillerez-vous, que diriez-vous à une association, à des associations pareilles?
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Alors, je dirais que c'est l'occasion effectivement de créer une sorte de stimulation, d'émulation pour les écrivains de la diaspora africaine, de manière à conforter et en même temps donner, comment dire, propulser et surtout permettre d'avoir des synergies au niveau des thématiques, au niveau des rencontres, que ce soit donc en Afrique ou ailleurs, hein, au niveau du monde entier, pour pouvoir donner une vue à justement la littérature, une plus grande percée, la littérature donc africaine, afro-diasporique, et susciter les consciences, réveiller, interpeller par rapport au racisme, par rapport aux discriminations. Donc, je me dirais que ça peut être une force, effectivement, de vraiment rallier, effectivement, les différentes associations, les jeunes écrivains, et leur permettre, effectivement, d'avoir cet appui qui n'est pas toujours aisé d'avoir. Je laisse traduire, merci.
Thank you very much. Quite an interesting question. And I think organizations like PAWA and WAFORD can serve as grounds for stimulation or grounds where they could simulate and guarantee a kind of synergy where we pool our efforts together. It should be like a rallying cry or a rallying place where we get writers to address concerns that are really targeted to the Black world, racism, discrimination, all the struggles, awaken the consciences of young people and encourage them to take onto writing without fear, without favor. So it will be a really good thing to see this association put their forces together and motivate young writers. Thank you.
Et j'ajouterais juste pour terminer que c'est aussi l'occasion de permettre comment dire, à l'échelle mondiale de prendre conscience de l'histoire et du patrimoine africain et donc et s'engager, un engagement effectivement universel. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you. I would finish by saying it is also an opportunity for this association to create a kind of global conscience awakening to make sure that what is happening to the Black world is not isolated or is less talked about. It is spread all over the world. We shouldn't let those slip by. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Yes. Can we listen to Lena? How can these associations help young women writers?
I think that it can help by amplifying voices. I think that, writers need to also learn how to talk about their work in a public space and on social media, um, and really, um, amplify their own stories. But an organization such as this can assist in that. I dealt with this in the public health space where we had researchers, Black researchers who had trouble getting their research out in the public space, in media. And then we had journalists who were seeking those stories, but there was no way for them to connect. So I co-created this organization with journalists and researchers to work together to amplify those stories. So I think that looking at ways of how to amplify these writers in spaces where it's difficult for them to get into, I think that would be crucial.
Thank you. And Mary, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think PAWA and WAFORD are already doing, well, let me say PAWA is already doing a lot with your writing retreats, which I think maybe we could extend that to secondary schools or to the younger, where we can get, not we, where PAWA can target the younger people who are interested in writing. I think those retreats are really helpful. And also, when I see a lot of call for submissions from PAWA, I think it's really necessary to go to, I don't know, let me not call it the grassroots. It's necessary to go to the target audience, the target people, the target those young people who are, because sometimes people really have a lot of talents, but they don't know where to express them. So take the opportunities to the people who are prepared to do the things. So, and then this panel, like, not only during the Women's Month, but also you could think about WAFORD and PAWA could think about organizing panels for aspiring writers, not only for iconic ones, for aspiring writers, and they would, I think you will have a lot of them who will come on board to discuss their challenges and to see how, even if there's just one person who succeeds to write after that, that's one person plus. So the efforts that you're already making, they are really commendable. Just amplify them to where you have the target audience. And talking about publishing, it is also challenging for older writers. So publishing is a big challenge. But now you have self-publishing. And so one thing that we also know is that publishing your book is not what is going to give you the money, but the book is going to help you to make a name that can carry you to places. So we could change the narrative and tell them, don't fear to publish, don't fear to write your stories. And it's so interesting if you find young people who want to even write stories, because everybody now is digital media. But so there's room to, I think there's a lot of opportunity for PAWA and WAFORD to bring young people on board.
All right, thank you. And last but not the least, Jennifer, nobody has spoken about money, need money. So Jennifer, how do we get money to carry out all these assignments you have listed for us?
Oh, money. Well, I have no problem with asking anybody for any money. So I think it should be something as easy as, hey, can I have $1, or do penny drives? There's always, or have a link where people can donate money to the organization, but simply just by asking. I mean, you have a 50-50 chance. They could say yes or they could say no. And no doesn't necessarily mean that you're never, ever going to give me any money. It just means not today because you don't have it. But most people don't mind digging in their pockets and giving you their change. So just simply asking, I have no problems with asking for money at all.
And Mary mentioned the issue of writers' residencies. Yes, we have one or two in Africa where we allow young women and even young men to come in for 4 weeks to sit down and put their stuff together. But we don't have enough. So this is one of the things that, and for me, I see that it's not too difficult. We have people who have apartments all over the place that and unused. Even universities, colleges, they can devote one of their apartments and open it for writers to stay for a few weeks in a year. So I think this is also some possibilities because you'll be surprised, especially for women who are always busy. And many of them will tell you that, look, I'm either an auntie to somebody, a sister to somebody, a wife to somebody, or a teacher. I'm always busy. If you give me just 4 weeks to be on my own, I can do a lot. So these are some of the things that we should also think of and be happy if this can come from some suggestions to help us. Right. So I think at this point, we'd like to go to the audience. We've been on for about 1.5 hours. I think Professor Indy, you are in a better position to see the online people so that you can call them and we'll take the questions, maybe 5 at a time before the panelists will answer them or to talk to the questions. Yes.
All right. Before I take the raised hands,
okay.
Ms. Chen, you will give me a minute. There is a question that was raised on the chat by Badami. Badami posed the question in French. I'll just translate the question. What do you think about addressing the American Indian writers or the writers of biracials in the Pan-African questions? How would you encourage that? That's the first question. So if you can address that, then I'll go to Ms. Chen from Australia.
Okay. Well, you want us to, I thought we should take about 5 questions so that we can cut down on time. Yeah, so we can take some questions. Yes.
Ms.
I've
Chen?
written that one down. Yes. So Chen, yes.
Come on camera and ask your question. Unmute.
Mute. Okay. Thank you, Professor Indy. Thank you, Dr. Wale, and wonderful panelists. It was really engaging. My question, anyone can answer. In this day and age, there is a heightened need to push certain agendas. And as writers, how do you stick to your own motivations? You have told us what drives you. So how do you stick? Do you give in to those agendas or you're sticking to what you write about?
Okay, thank you. All right, any more questions?
Any more questions?
Of students, so it should be able to.
Yeah, there is another question.
Okay.
Is it Dr. Ojo? You have the floor. Olumuyiwa. We're waiting for your question. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you come on camera?
Oh, absolutely no.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. Very interesting discussion this evening. And I want to thank the organizers and the panelists. My question is directed to the women. As women, as African women and women in diaspora, how do you react and reflect the gender, transgender, and the gender identity growing in the world as against the original African communal structure? In Africa, gender identity is a very primal issue. But today in the world, you have a fluidity that is growing in gender identity. So, how do women reflect this in their writings? My second question relates to migration and how people are treated in the world. We have issues of transborder migration and others, and countries closing access to people from other races. How do you reflect this also in your writing? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question? Audience, please. Question time.
Maybe we just.
I know there are a lot of people in the audience I see who have questions. Don't keep the question to ask me after this session, okay? I would want the questions asked here.
Anyway, maybe Prof, maybe we can allow the panel to start answering these questions and then we'll wait for the other ones.
All right.
So I think anybody can. We have 3 questions here. The first one from
there are 4 questions.
Okay, 4. Yes.
Yeah.
Badame, yes. On the issue of how do you address the issue of American Indian writers, that is those with racial background. Then from Miss Chen, she wants to know how you're able to stick to your own agenda to avoid getting distracted, because there are so many things flying all over the place. How do you stay focused? And then from Dr. Udo, he has two questions. He said, how do you handle the issue of transgender identity as compared to the original African situation? And then his second question was on migration, on the issues of transborder migration, the challenges that migrants face. How do you reflect this in your writing? So I think anybody wants to start on any question can, the panelists, you can pick anyone you like and answer. All right, Mary, let's hear you.
Okay, let me go with how do you stick to your theme or to what you're writing about? I just want to say that before you start writing, what is your why? Why are you writing? I am writing to raise awareness on stigma and stereotypes. And I'm writing to help people to rebuild their self-confidence and self-improvement. So I'm focused on self-improvement. Whether you are in what agenda, you still need your self-improvement. And I'm thinking about my why. So I think it's more easy for you to focus on why you made you to start writing than to go about writing about every other thing. So I stick to my self-development and I stick to ways of helping people how they can improve themselves.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Camille has a hand
yes.
up.
Okay.
So I wanted to deal with the transnational migration and writing question. That is a very common theme in African women's writing and in Caribbean women's writing. And I see no reason to stop that great tradition now. These are very important topics because they not only deal with the movement across border, but across culture, how we bring culture with us as we move across these borders, and why that is important to building what we find when we get there. For example, those of you who know about the Windrush generation in England in the late 40s, 1948 to probably 1960, what if Africans and Caribbeans and Indians and Arabs had not gone to England during that period? What would England look like today? To be frank, unseasoned food, no music. There's a lot of transition that happens when people cross borders. And I think that it's only appropriate that this is reflected in literature. What I have not seen a whole lot of, aside from Brown Girl Brownstones and a few other novels, like there's one called Black Cake now, and just different novels from Caribbean American writers, I have not really seen a lot of discussion about how big of a transition that is to move from the Caribbean to the US, or even from Africa to the US. I'm sure it's probably quite similar. So what I'm doing in my own writing now is I have a whole novel where I'm just dealing with that transition, but not only what was it like to come so much as what was it like to go back, to be 2 or 3 generations in and to go back, and what do you see and what do you experience? So.
Thank you. Any other intervention? Any other on the questions? Okay. All right. Do we still have more questions?
No, 2 questions. They've addressed 2 questions. I think they still have 2 other questions to address.
So what were they again, please?
Yes, the issue of how do you address writers of American background, and then how do you what's your take, or how do you reflect the issue of gender, transgender identity in your writings? I think those are the 2 unanswered ones.
I would go with the other one was about the American Indians.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to chip in that most often people write from the experiences that they have lived. So if an American was living in India, they would mix the experience that they had in America and what they are having in India, and they will look at where there's a convergence. So I think it's enriching when you are writing from the background of diverse experiences. Like I said earlier, that I have lived in so many different countries and speaking different languages. So you see the world from a broader perspective. And I think that is enriching in the work that you produce. That should be a plus. And that would also help to remove some biases that people might have because they don't know the culture. Sometimes when you don't know the culture, it's not when you don't know the culture, it's a little complicated. But when you are talking about people who have their deep cultures that have been changed, I don't know, that have been modified. I want to say modified. When you are talking about cultures that have been modified, sometimes it's good to hear from the people, the original people. But also it is not, we are not it's not easy to live in isolation. Now we live in a world where we are coming together. So can we create spaces where people can really come together and share their experiences or talk about these cultural things? They are difficult conversations, but they are necessary.
Thank you.
Good. So,
Hey, this is
I think
Rena. I didn't quite understand the question about transgender
yes.
identities. However, I would say, just like Mary, was saying, people write from their lived experiences, or at least I do. And so when I'm interviewing someone about their lived experiences, it's important for me to treat every person with respect and dignity and compassion. And I learned very early on in my journalism career that I do not know the story. I'm going to interview this person, but I have to leave all my judgments, all my preconceived notions behind me, and interview the person and hear from their own mouths their stories. So it wouldn't matter who I was interviewing or whose story I was trying to tell. I tell human stories. I tell, the complexity of human lives and the beauty of human lives. So that's how I would treat, and that's how I would answer that question. I had a experience in school where I went out to interview this woman, and I thought I knew her story. I went out like, oh yeah, this is going to be a story about a lady who she let her, her life pass her by. She missed all these opportunities, and she's working at the school cafeteria, and she's like wishing all these, I created that story, and like now I'm just horrified, at my younger self for doing that. Cause I thought, ooh, I was like, this is the story I want to tell versus, what is your story? It turned out this lady was so happy. She loved her job. She loved her little life. She loved her Western movies,
Yeah.
So I would say that everyone's story deserves to be told and from their own words.
Thank you. I'll clarify. I'll clarify the question of transgender issue, because what Dr. Ojo was asking is there is a push now, almost like wanting to force people to accept that this is a fact, and comparing it with what happened or what is happening on the African continent as the traditional setting. How do you navigate this kind of issues in your writing?
I'd like to try with this one. I'm not African, I'm Black, and Trinidadian. So how I grew up in Trinidad with my grandparents, and there was a huge LGBTQIA plus community. And from what I understand, it has always been there, and it's not going anywhere, and nor does anybody want it to. They're just Trini. When we write about them, it's not like we're writing about some weird or odd or strange thing. But then again, I think it's different in Trinidad because even we differ in personality from the other island nations where LGBTQI plus people might be harassed or discriminated against because of their gender identity or their sexual orientation. In Trinidad, it's just not that way. And I've talked to other Trinidadians trying to figure out if I imagined it, and I didn't. That's just the way it's been. That's just how it is. And I understand in Africa where the continent is comprised of a series of individual cultures in individual locations where people may be a bit more conservative. And while the Caribbean is very conservative, I suspect the continent is a conglomeration of places that are more so, particularly when it comes to gender identity and sexual orientation. So maybe the solution is not to, how do I say this? I don't want to be insulting. Maybe the solution is to accept people as they are, while also in that respect for people and their gender identity and their sexual orientation. That doesn't mean that people who have other opinions and other viewpoints don't need to be respected. It has to be an environment where people are just, I don't agree with you, but I accept you. I'm not going to harm you. I'm going to let you be. As long as you don't do anything that's harmful to me or anybody else, then I'm going to respect you and accept you as one human to another. And I don't know how possible that is in some settings. Like I could say that about Trinidad, I can't say that about Jamaica. So, you know.
All right.
I think as an
go ahead.
So, yeah, I wanted to say as an African, I think that's a very complex issue because traditionally it's either male or female, or you're straight. So all of these new, I call them new because maybe they existed in Africa before, but no one was talking about them. But all of these new themes that are emerging, I think as a writer, you still have your why. You have why you're writing. So if you want to follow the new trends, you have why you're writing. It's a taboo for Africa. And if I'm going to stand and raise awareness about the stigma that women have because they are divorced, and then I enter again and say, I have to accept the people who have different sexual orientations, I think I'm missing my mission. So you stick to your mission, and sometimes you just accept people for who they are, so long as they don't harm you. It's a complicated thing, like I would say.
All right. I wanted to jump in and read a question from Professor Wycliffe Wakesian Jorore of Texas. He says, what is your take on the common phrase that women are their own enemies when it pertains to their social and political empowerment? That's one. What are your experiences and perspectives on this narrative?
Let me go. I have worked a lot in women's empowerment issues across different countries. And I think that phrase that women are their own enemies is a phrase that is coined by the men to discourage women or to hit women against each other. Women are really not their own enemies. That's what society wants us to think about. I think women are the most people who work in solidarity. Politics is a different because socially women work together. Why is it that politically they would say that we are our own enemies? And that's why I think that it is a planned, people plan to have the result that they want, and then they put in the strategy to divide. For me, or for the time that we have been working in women's empowerment, I think women have always socially really come together to do a lot of changes in society. And I think I really might be overstating it. I think most men are really not ready for women's leadership. And so they are really not ready to leave women to get to a certain level, when we are still talking about the glass ceiling for women, where you can't go above a certain level, even if you are as qualified as your male counterparts. So that narrative, I think it is like intended to get the results that people want. And I'm talking from my own experiences as somebody who has worked in gender issues across different countries. They will tell you that women is the woman's enemy. But I know countries where women are leaders and they are doing very well, and they are being supported by women too.
All right, thank you, Dr. Camille. Your hand is up.
Yeah, so I have to agree with Mary about this. I think there's a little bit of male spice being sprinkled on that question. However, I also want to point out, to be fair, I have witnessed women try to harm other women in the workplace. This is not an uncommon situation. And what makes it even more despicable is when it's a woman of color harming another woman of color. Because we have both come through the same fire to get where we are. And then your end goal is to destroy another woman. And I'm going to twist this question in that direction. I am disturbed by continuing to see women try to be each other's undoing in situations where we don't have anybody else supporting us. I am ashamed that I'm happy on one end, but also ashamed that all throughout my career as an academic, I have been supported by men and not women. I'm happy that there were those brothers who were on point and ready to help and ready to step up and do what they needed to do to help me advance my career. But I am disappointed that I had so many women trying to knock the wind out of my sails at every turn, or knock the legs out from under me, and for no other reason other than they thought I was doing something better than them, or whatever the little petty case may be. I think that is something we do need to work on, because I cannot imagine the women in my grandmother's generation treating each other this way. And I grew up around those women. And these are women who would do anything for each other, who would literally stand in front of a man about to abuse a woman and take the hit rather than let their friend take it. And then to come to this stage where we are beating each other. And I don't know, maybe it's a lack of resources for women that is causing it. I don't know what's causing it, but it's disappointing to see, and I keep seeing it happening. So that's my take.
Dr. Wale, back to you.
Thank you so much. I think we've had a very rich and engaging discourse today. We're about 2 hours, almost 2 hours on. Well, I think Professor Wycliffe is still saying something. I've seen women's deans stand. Okay, can I read?
Dr. Njorore is simply confirming what Dr. Camille Alexander just said, that I have seen women deans stand in the way of fellow women to be elevated to full professorship. That happens a lot in academia, and I would like to put a little clarification here. When I hear the comment that it is a men's spin put on it, this question came from the experience. I'm happy you all shared the fact that we write from lived experiences. The academic field in academia, we witness things that people in the streets and elsewhere do not witness. And Professor Njorore has his finger here on something that I can attest to minute by minute in every single institution of higher learning I've been at on planet Earth. So we have women, when they see another woman coming up, they think she's a threat to them and they don't want it. So that's what Professor Njorore is pointing out. Thank you, Prof. Njorore.
Well, thank you. If there are no more interventions, I think this is a very nice place to hand over back to Professor Indy for his closing remarks. And just to thank the wonderful ladies who have been giving us a lot of information from different perspectives. I'm happy that the WADOF is working hard. That is the diasporic arm of the Pan-African Writers Association. We are always happy to bring more writers of different backgrounds on board. Like I said earlier on, in PAWA, we have about 45 active countries, and our headquarters is in Accra, Ghana, but we try to distribute our activities all over, spread our activities all over Africa. Professor Indy and I were in Morocco sometime last year for some activities. And we've also had activities in Nigeria. We've had in Kenya, we have in Ghana. And I'm speaking to you from Morocco because I'm also here doing some work for PAWA. And we have confirmed that through literature and culture, we've been able to promote African culture and even culture across other countries. I came to Morocco a few months ago to do some work, and my experience here has been wonderful. I mean, again, there was that myth that North Africans don't consider themselves to be Africans. They say they are Arabs. But since I've been here, I've seen that that is not absolutely true. I've been welcomed, taken care of, and we've had a lot of collaboration. So we're looking forward to more collaborations with writers in all areas of learning and geography. And I'm looking forward to Camille linking us up with Trinidad and Tobago and maybe Jamaica. My father went to school in Trinidad and Tobago in the 50s. So I still remember some of the old pictures in his album. So we are open to collaborations and suggestions. So on this note, I want to thank you once more and hand over back to Professor Indy for his closing remarks. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Before I even give my closing remarks, I want to speak a little bit on behalf of Dr. Danglad. She tenders her apologies for having to leave earlier because of other obligations. So she left a little early, and she is very happy that she was part of this, and that hopefully she will stay in touch with the other panelists after this event, that this is just the beginning of things. So before I take the floor to give my closing remarks, I'll ask the panelists on board. I'm going to spotlight you, all of you, for everybody. And I would request that you simply take 30 seconds and give us your last word for this wonderful celebration of Women's History Month. Just go in any order. Just take turns and 30 seconds. Give us your last word.
Hi, this is Raina. I'll go. Don't quite know what I'm going to say, but I'm feeling something. And um, I, I want to share to the women to use your voice, your true voice. It wasn't until I found my true voice that I was able to write um, my true stories. I was trying to tell other people's stories using their voice, and I had to first identify who I am as a woman and appreciate my experiences, because all of that matters and all of that does influence your writing. So you have to have a clear sense of who you are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me go.
Yeah.
I think it's been a very wonderful experience, and I totally agree with Reina. You have to know yourself. Knowing yourself is the first thing that helps you to build your self-confidence and to believe in yourself. When you believe in yourself, no matter what, you're going to do your best. So know yourself, and especially give yourself that self-compassion that you will give to your best friend. Treat yourself as your best friend, and so when life throws all those things at you, at least you are your best friend and you can rely on you.
Thank you.
I'll jump in here. One thing I can say as a writer and a woman is to give yourself space to grow. Like as you change, you grow, your voice changes. So it's not something that it comes overnight. It's a journey, it's a process. But be gentle and kind to yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. First, let me mention that I think of Women's History Month like I think of Black History Month. I think that's a farce. Every month is Women's History Month, and every month is Black History Month. We don't get a month, we get the whole year. And the rest of you are along for the ride. But if we truly want to tap in to the soul of being a Black woman writer, I think we have to give ourselves every benefit that these other fabulous panelists have mentioned. And we also have to give ourselves time and we're like plants. A plant doesn't grow overnight. It takes weeks for a plant to get strong enough to stand on its own. So maybe we need to start being a little bit kinder to ourselves and giving ourselves that time to grow as writers, and maybe not beating up on ourselves as much as we are wont to do when we don't accomplish what we set out to accomplish in the speed with which we think we can accomplish it.
Thank you very, very, very much. And I would just like to thank this fabulous, wonderful panelist. You have done a great job, but I'm going to say this. We have heard you as the coordinator of WAFORD. I promise maybe the next panel or webinar you would be listening to, I'm introducing a concept that most of you might not be familiar with. Your men are with you. Your men are not against you. We have male feminists, and I'm going to put a panel of male feminists to talk about their activism through writing and advocating in their writing for everything that our sisters, our mothers, our women, they stand for. I want to thank you all and reiterate, echo the sentiments you've all echoed, and especially what Dr. Camille Alexander points out. let's not have this silly habit of celebrating our women once every year in 1 month as if we've done something. The world without women is non-existent. I would still point out, I said it in other platforms, the last time I checked, no man ever existed that was born without a woman. But you go back in history, women are the bedrocks of every society. So we can talk about this until tomorrow, but I just want to say thank you. And I will thank Dr. Wale Okediran again for a wonderful moderation. And let me not forget those in the audience, because all of you in the audience, especially those who've stayed till the end, I want to applaud you for staying till now. And I would say your staying until this time is not wasted time. It is not wasted time, because what I have heard from the panelists, the questions that came from the audiences, they are all, brain stimulating. So thank you again for this electrifying conversation. And let's keep Black writing up and running. Whether we shouldn't call it women's writing, we shouldn't call it men's writing. Let's keep this Black writing and talk about our struggle from now till the end of times. Thank you very much. And you guys have a blessed and wonderful day. Cheers.